Okay, the question that everybody wants to know the answer to is, what is a playback engineer? It's a great question. It's a question I wondered as well when I first heard about playback. So I'm going to give you the textbook answer to that question, and I'm going to elaborate and tell you about some things that I've learned about it in my years being a playback engineer. A playback engineer is the person responsible for collecting, organizing, recording, editing, and operating or playing back the pre-recorded elements of a live performance. Playback engineers come from many different backgrounds, including musicians, music producers, and studio engineers. A good playback engineer is able to bridge the gap between the musicians on stage and the engineers and techs behind the stage, contributing to a seamless flow in a live show production. Now, typically how this works is, I'm gonna just kind of break it down from how I would go from you actually getting hired, right? So let's say, such and such artist, Johnny the artist, hits you up and is like, yo, I need playback for my band. My production is getting bigger. I need a good playback engineer, okay? A lot of times, most likely, you will get that gig from someone who's already involved in the situation, right? So maybe you know one of the members of the band, or you know the MD or something like that, right? So they hit you up and like, hey, I want to bring you in to run playback for Johnny the artist. All right, cool. So what's going to happen is they're going to give you a whole bunch of files, right? And these will be all the files of Johnny the artist. They might give you the whole catalog. You never know. They might hand you a hard drive that got all his music on it, and it'll be broken down by individual files. So it'll be like all the vocal files, all the music, And so you'll get a list, or maybe you'll sit down with the MD, or maybe they'll just kind of tell you what they need or which songs they need. They give you a list of 8 songs or 10 songs, and you'll have to go into that hard drive or that folder and get those files and put them in a session. You will build the playback session, right? So after you build the session, like kind of the initial foundation of what the session will be, you will go into rehearsals with the band and the artist, and you guys will together create the live arrangement of those songs. You'll spend whatever time you spend in rehearsals, and then you get to the show. When you get to the show, you find yourself a space on stage, usually on the side of the stage somewhere. You set up a table, set up your rig, your computers, everything, and you will actually run the show. Like, you will press play on the tracks, almost like a DJ, okay? Now, there are different levels of complexity for what a playback engineer can do, and it's very dependent on the situation. Different artists have different needs. Different bands have different requirements. And so depending on the situation, you could be doing a host of different things. So let's go through some of the levels of complexity that can exist for you as a playback engineer. We got play and stop, which is literally just the session is what it is. The songs are being done exactly this, the same way, start to finish. All you do is press play on a song. It gets to the end, it stops, go to the next song, press play again. That's play and stop. That's about as basic as it gets. Then you have a level that's more like DJing, okay? Now, this is where you're a little bit more a part of the show, kind of an extension of the band. Sort of how when you think about how a DJ and a rapper, the rapper might say, okay, what we doing next? And the DJ picks which song. It might be something kind of like that, where you and the artist have certain cues, where if the artist says a certain thing, you know which song to play and you know when to start. Or maybe a thing where, maybe you have a certain beat you have to come in on, where the drummer has a drum solo and then he does a tick, 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 and you hit play, something like that. So that's a little more involved. You have to be a little bit more, you gotta have some rhythm, you gotta, that's where it helps to be a musician or a producer or someone who's used to kind of being in those environments and doing things like that. Then you have another level where you can be doing all of that stuff, but also controlling all of the MIDI operations on stage, meaning that your session is sending MIDI commands out to instruments on stage for them to change patches. So when it goes from one song to the next, you might send a MIDI command to the keyboard player's station to change all the sounds in his keyboards, or to the drummer, if he has a drum pad, it'll change the sounds in his drum pad, things like that. And so even higher than that, you have a level where you could be doing all of those things, as well as also recording all of the inputs on stage, meaning you are running tracks for the show, but you're also recording everything, vocals and everything, and maybe even doing a mix of the show afterwards. And like I said, it just depends on the artist and what they need. I've only met one guy who was doing all of that, and he was the playback engineer for Beyonce and Jay-Z on the Run tour. So I want to talk a little bit about the playback engineer's role in the creative process of building the show. Obviously, your band, your musical director, and the artist will be doing most of the heavy lifting, but there is always opportunity for you to contribute in whatever ways that your skill set allows you to, right? There may be times where you have to add certain sound effects, or add certain types of delays or reverbs, or just different things within the session. Maybe layering drum sounds, or maybe, just little things that you hear that you can suggest that you think, hey, I think this might make this play better, right? But ultimately, your job as the playback engineer is to create an environment where the band and the artist can have a seamless workflow, meaning that when they have ideas, you can execute those ideas within the session quickly so that they can hear them to know, hey, this will work or this won't work. But if it takes you 10, 20, 30 minutes every time they ask, hey, what would this sound like? That's gonna create some issues, because now, 20 minutes done gone by, we forgot we was doing. I don't even care no more. I'm on my phone, I'm on Instagram now. You know what I'm saying? So part of your job is to be quick. You need to have a good grasp on, this is why I think playback is great for studio engineers, because sometimes artists want to hear effects that are similar to what's in the studio. And so if you don't know what some of the standards of like effect processing is, or certain sounds that a lot of people are using, it might be something that's like chorusy and super reverby. And if you don't know how to do that, it's going to put you at a disadvantage, because now they're going to start to feel like, well, this person doesn't really know what they're doing. So you need to have somewhat of a grasp on like trendy sounds, so to speak. At least have an idea of when an artist, because artists don't always know the technical terms. Even sometimes musicians, they don't know how to technically explain to you what they want. So there will be times where they'll be explaining what they want, and you need to be able to speak that language enough to know what they're actually asking for so that you can do it. And sometimes it's frustrating, because you might do a bunch of different effects and edits and things, and they're like, oh, I don't like none of that. Let's just go back to what we had. But that's part of your job, is just to give them the option to hear it, to know, hey, this might work. Putting a show together, it's a lot of trial and error. A lot of times you don't know what's gonna sound good until you hear it. Sometimes you need to play it 3 or 4 times and then listen back, and then you like, nah, this isn't really working. And so it's just a lot of piecing things together, and sometimes the process can take a while. So you need to be patient, but you also just need to be capable. You need to have a creative ear. It's really important, especially when you start getting into the upper levels of playback, meaning like starting to do playback for bigger artists, or artists who have a bigger production or more grand ideas for things they want to do on stage, musically, visually, things like that. Another thing that I always say is a mark of a good playback engineer is someone who doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is I always say that I know I did a good job as a playback engineer if nobody knows that I was there, right? Meaning somebody in the crowd, let's say you go see a show, everything in the show goes perfectly. You don't know that there's somebody on the side of the stage playing tracks, right? That the band is playing to, some of the vocals and things that you're hearing, certain effects, certain sounds, you don't realize that that's coming from a computer on the side of the stage. But if something went wrong, such as, let's say the artist is singing a song and it starts out a cappella and then halfway through you start the track. Let's say you start the track and it's the wrong song. Now you know, whoa, like who was that? Like who's like, who just, you know what I'm saying? So a playback engineer really did his job or her job well if you don't even know that they exist. You don't know that there was somebody back there doing that job. So that's why I say don't exist. I think the thing that excites me most about playback is that there's a lot of room for innovation. There's a lot of things I think about this position that are still being explored and expanded. And I think it is a field that is ripe for creative people to come in and find new ideas and help to grow it into what ultimately I think, you know, could be the heights of what playback could be. So there obviously have been and are people that are doing that currently. You got people like Henry Strange, companies like Savant, you know, people that are pushing kind of the boundaries of just seeing how far this thing can go. And, you know, I'm proud to now be a part of introducing people into this field that can bring the new ideas and help to continue to push it forward. So this was our explanation of what a playback engineer is and does. This is the foundation for everything we'll be learning for the rest of this course. Now let's lock in and get ready for module 1.